Alright, we're back. This episode is just going to be on rebuilding the original injectors. Here I've got the pop tester down into my pickle jar. There's the pressure gauge. You want it around 1950 psi. Here's various grit sandpaper, and the reason you have that, I think this is 2000, 1600. That's the Mercedes source kit. All this stuff comes together if you order this pop tester from Mercedes source. Now let me see if I can get the reason you want the sandpaper. Okay, you see that little, you can barely see it. It's a little ring that goes right around here. There you go. You can probably see it there. See that ring? You want that to be a smooth surface with no ring on it. And the process for doing that, you start with the, say, 2000 grit, and you sand it with a little bit of pressure and a circular motion. And I've got some, this is clean diesel. It's important you use clean diesel with everything. That's just straight, fresh out of the pump into a brand new can. And I put a little diesel on here instead of water. And I'm just going around in circles. And we'll see what that looks like. Alright, let me clean it off here. Okay, still see the ring there? So I'm going to go back to the 1000 grit. Let me move the 2000 out of the way here. Keep in mind, guys, I'm doing this with one hand, which sucks. But, alright. I'll just dip this in a little bit of the clean diesel. Put it over here to the 1000 grit. And there we go. Oh, shit, I forgot to mention this. This is very important. This is a granite, perfectly flat granite slab. I ordered that several years ago from eBay. You either need a piece of glass or a granite slab. It has to be a perfectly flat surface. A bench will not work. You can't do it on your workbench. That's not perfectly flat. This is considered perfectly flat. So we're going to do it because it's got to be, this is the mating surface inside the injector housing. So that's with a 1000 grit. Ooh, you can still barely see that ring. So I'm just going to keep going. Again, this is with one hand. Now I'm going to rotate it a little bit so my fingers are putting pressure in a different area. You just want to do it as even as possible. Alright, look at that. See how that ring has started to completely disappear? You can barely see, a little faint. So anyway, you want to repeat that process. There you go. You can barely see the ring is still on there. And once that ring is gone, you have a perfectly flat surface. You want to also do it with this surface. Turn it over and do it here. This is the part that seals onto the top of this part. So you can see this one right here. I've already lapped that one. Now I want to take the injector body, and I want to lap that one because you want that to be a good mating surface. Alright, I'm going to show you a before and after. This has not been lapped. It has not been resurfaced, on the sandpaper, on the slab, the perfectly flat granite slab. And you can see the wear ring. See the wear ring right there? This one is done. See how that looks the same? And again, on the other side, you can see like there's a little bitty divot or a little mark right there, and you can see some uneven looking wear. me clean this off. It's important. You got to get these. See, I just got that one dirty again because my hands are dirty, but stuff's got to be clean. There you go. See how shiny and smooth and clean that one looks? That's what you want. Now for assembly, again, you want to get everything really clean. You put your injector nozzle down in here, drop this on top of it, drop your I forgot what that damn thing's called, but it goes in this way, not this way. It goes in with the long end pointing down. That goes in the hole on top. I didn't get it in the hole, but then this goes on top of that, and then your spacer goes on top of there, and then you screw your housing top onto it, and you got to torque that to a specific torque setting. So I'm going to get an injector and go ahead and assemble this one. I'm going to clean them up real good, soak them in diesel for a second, and then torque it down and put it on the pop tester and see what pressure we got. And again, this is the injector housing, and this creates the seal at the bottom and the seal down from the top. Here's some brand new Monarch injectors. They just came from Germany. Monarchs are in the diesel over there, 300 SD. They're outstanding, great injectors. So you dip the Monarch down in the diesel fuel. Just kind of dip everything in the diesel fuel, get it lubricated, then assemble it. You do it in a vise and you torque it to a very specific setting, and I'll show that. And then you pop test it. Alright, I'm going to show you something. These injectors come sealed in these very nice, here's some old cases I have. They're in these cases, they're sealed tight with a light coating of oil on them from the factory. Now, there's a little test. You want your hands to be clean. You don't want any foreign particles on these. So I'm going to pull this guy out. And you see that there's the little needle seat there. But the way to test these is, if I can do this with one hand, see the oil that's on there? You pull out the little, there you go, the little needle, and it should fall back in. See how it fell back in under its own weight? It's a very precise machining surface in there. And see how it smoothly fell back in there on its own weight? That's exactly what you want. If it doesn't do that, if it gets stuck, there's a manufacturing problem with the injector, and you do not want that. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this one. I'm going to dip it in some clean diesel. There we go. See if I can do this with one hand. Alright. Let's see. I'm going to lift it up here. There we go. I just set that down in there like that. And I'm going to put my finger on it so it doesn't fall out. Yeah, this is not going to be possible with one hand. So I'm just going to put the parts in there like I showed you before, then I'll record again in a second. Alright, I got the injector assembled. The trick is, when you're assembling it, here's an old used injector here. Basically, you get all the parts, all the parts down in there, the spring and spacer and all that stuff, and then you put the top part on. You put the top part on like that and come down on the top of it. That's the easiest way to do it. I've got this one assembled, and the manual says to torque it anywhere from 52 to 59 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to torque it to 56 foot-pounds. And to do that, the size socket is 1 1/16, and that fits on there. I don't know what that is in metric. So I'm going to torque that, and then we're going to do a pop test. Alright, I've got it on the pop tester. You want to snug this up with a 17mm wrench. I'll probably have a couple of leaks this first time, but and I've just got some wood screws screwing this to my bench. Let's go ahead and start pumping it up and see what we got here. It's going to take a minute for the air to get out of the system. There it goes. Alright. 1500. Oh, right there. Did you see that? It sprayed, it popped it right at 2000. Watch the injector and watch the gauge. So right when I get close to 2000, now I think I've got a little leak I need to fix, but when I get to 2000, here we go. That went to like 2100. Now watch the spray on the injector. Here it goes, right about. See how it's a fine mist? That's the kind of spray you want. Actually, see if we can get a side view of this. It's like a triangular looking shape. See that? That's a good injector. So this pops it like the line right after 2000. Yeah, it's right before this line. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so it's like 2050 psi. Yep, right there, 2050 psi. I didn't show this earlier in the video. Here is the injector nozzle specs. There's the Bosch part number, but injection pressure should be, nozzle pressure should be 135 to 143 bar, and 43 bar is 270 or 2075 psi. 135 is 1958 psi. What's this? Has a little number 1 there. The difference between any two injection nozzles within one engine must not exceed 5 bar. So I'm going to go through and test some of the other ones and see where I'm at, and write down all the settings, and I want to get them all matched. I want to get them to all pop at the same time. Let me just do one more check here. We're looking at, should pop at 2050. Okay, that was a little more than 2050 that time. Yeah, a little more. So 2050, 2075, it's in that area. I'm going to see what the other ones are at. And I'm going to leave this one together, leave it alone, and move on to the next one. Kind of see where I'm at, get a baseline. And if I have one, for example, since this is, there's only one shim in here, so I might have to remove that shim and replace it with a thinner one. You know, we're talking, you know, one of these thinner ones, and you know, it's a combination of shims. You play around with the shims, and you just want to get them all equal, and that's how you do it. All right, the washer that was in here was causing this to pop at like 2500. So I've decreased the size a little bit. I went to a 1.5 washer, which is a little thinner than this. I just eyeballed it and saw that it was a little thinner. So to decrease the pressure that it takes to pop, you want to decrease the thickness of the washer. And you can also stack combinations of washers to get the pressure set right. So I'm going to try a 1.5 thick washer. Here's the original over here. And we're going to see what this does. Okay, check this out. So this one was popping at 2500 with whatever washer was in the injector. So that's too much. So I changed to this 1.5 washer. I think that's, I I guess that's 1.5 millimeters. And look where it pops now. Remember, the other one was about 2050 to 2075. Okay, look at that. It was right at 2050, 2050 again. Now, also, when you pump this up and then hold it, it should leak down slowly and smoothly, but it should not leak down more than 25% in 5 seconds. So once you get up right before the pressure, we'll go up to like 1950 and then stop. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. That's about a perfect leak down right there. See, in about 5 seconds it went from here to here, which is probably a little under. That's probably like 18 to 20%. I'm just eyeballing it. I can tell by the size of the gauge. So again, if we go up to 2,000 and then hold it, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. That was not more than 25% leak down. So that's good. That's a good smooth leak down. So again, this one was 2050, which my other one was around 2050, 2075. Yep, it's about the same. So these two injectors have matched pressure. Now the spec I think is 1950. So I'm going to see what it says in the field service manual about doing it about 100 psi more. I might have to decrease the shim, maybe from like a 1.5 to a 1.2, or take a 1.2 and a 0.10 to make a 1.3 to get it down to around 1950 to 2000 if I have to. I'm going to see what the manual says about that. Here's the third injector. Just put the washer that came in there back in it, and it's popping around. Look like 2300. Yeah, right around 2300. So I'm going to try to change this spring to a 1.5 with a 0.10, so 1.7, and see if I can get it around 2050. I'm sorry, that'd be a 1.6. Okay, I went the wrong way in my shims. I actually needed to put a thinner shim in there, because by adding the 1.6 shim, it's now popping it like a little bit higher, like 50 psi higher. So I need to go the other way on my shims, put less shims in there. So I put the 1.2 shim in there. Remember, before I had the 1.5 and the 0.10, so I was at 1.6. So I went to a 1.2, and I've gone too far the other way. I'm at like, whoops, sorry. I'm at like 1600. Or, yeah, 1650 psi, which that's actually the right setting, I think, for a non-turbo diesel. Turbo diesel is 1950. So I'm going to go up. Let's see. I'm going to put a 10 and a 5 in there. I'm going to go up 0.15. Okay, remember I had a 1.2 in there, and it was popping at like 1650. So I added a 0.10 to the 1.2 and a 0.05. So I went up to 1.35. And 1.35 is popping at 1950. And 1950 is the field service manual specification. Yep, it's about 1940, 1950. That's the field service manual spec. And let's just check the spray pattern. Oh man, that looks good. So this one right here I have dead on. Remember the other ones I had at 2075 or 2050, so they're about 100 psi more. 75 to 100 psi more, and I'm going to see if that's okay. I know if they're within 100 psi, you're good. Yeah, between nozzles, it should not exceed 5 bar, which is 72 psi. We'll say 75 psi. But I like this one. That's at 1950. So I've gone back. I've used, I went through lots of shims and changing springs and making adjustments. And this first one would consistently hit between 1950 and 1975. Second one was 1975. Third one seemed like it hit 1950 a lot. This one would hit 1975 and 2000, and this last one is 1950. So this is pretty much dead on according to the factory service manual. Let's see, this is the last one. Right there, it looks like it hit 2000 that time. There you go, 1975. Let's see if I can get the, there we go. There we go, 1975, 75, 2000, 75. So this last one, most of the time, it hits 1975. Basically, you do it a lot of times, and you see which one is hitting most most of the time. So we're right there in the exact range. So okay, there we go. That's hitting 1975. What I did notice is the Monarch injectors, you always have to lower the spring pressure a little bit because these new injectors like to fire off a little bit early. I'm sorry, the new injectors, like, they can hold a lot of pressure. So I decreased the shim size. I made them smaller. So, because they were firing off at like 23 to 2500 with just the shims that were already in the injectors. So I lowered the shim size. Seemed like around 1.5 to 1.7 was like the sweet spot range that got these numbers. Anyway, I've been at it for about 3 hours, and now I'm done. And that's how you rebuild injectors. I don't know, that'll save you $100, $150 if you do it yourself. Plus, if you do it yourself, you know that it's done right, and you know that it's exactly correct. So I've got the injectors over here, and here's the heat shields. I got these little heat shields. These are just a couple of bucks from some guys up the street own a Mercedes shop, and they just ordered them for me from their parts supplier. But it was just like, I think it was like $3 for these. These aren't reusable items. Interesting, these must be a new design after 1980, because the original heat shields did not look like that. Here they are right here. The original heat shield, see, it's flat here, and actually I think that would be convex. See, it kind of bulges out like an eyeball. So we'll compare these originals. So I guess there was a design change. So in these aftermarket or whatever, you see there's a little groove, and the originals also, there's like a stepped, see if I can show that. Yeah, these are just totally different. If you were curious, that's what the original Mercedes engineers came up with there. So they must have changed it for some reason. I'm just looking for the torque specs. So this just goes through everything you saw in the video. Just goes through all the process that I went through earlier. Field service manual has some really great diagrams about how all this, how these injectors work. Here's what I was looking for. Removal and installation of injection nozzles. See, there's the nozzle and the head, glow plug, and the injection nozzle should be 70 to 80 Newton meters, which is 51 to 59 foot-pounds, which is the same torque spec for actually tightening the upper and lower half of the injector housing. So I'm going to torque these into the engine at 56 foot-pounds, kind of a nice sweet spot in the middle. And again, I might have said this earlier, but if you have leaks from the engine or from the injector housing, do not over-tighten these. Over-tightening them is not going to fix the leak. It could actually damage the seal and warp some components. I don't know if warp is the right word, but the reason they leak is because they're not cleaned and lapped properly, or they're not seated in the engine properly. So anyway, I'm going to grab, let's see, here's number one. I don't think it matters, but let's see if I can just set this guy right here. And yep, pop that down in there. I wasn't looking at the camera. I hope I caught that. And then I'm going to screw that in. Now I've also already torqued the collar nuts. That was long ago in another video. So right now I'm just going to put these guys in. It's important not to get them upside down. So you want the little grooved top facing up. Man, these injectors look so nice. Again, I had them bead blasted at Will's machine shop. Then he soaked all the components in this new chemical he's been using. And boy, they just came out beautiful. I mean, look at that. The injection pump is rebuilt. Brand new, awesome nozzles. Really excited to get this together. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in, torque them to 56 foot-pounds. All right, I want to show you something that's really important. In order to torque these down, the injector has to go into a socket. And you don't want a socket that's going to make contact with the fuel or the diesel input and output or overflow. I forgot what those are called, but the fuel, if there's any excess fuel, it passes through these little nozzles here. And you don't want those nozzles to make contact with your socket and bend when you're torquing it. So if you look here, see how the nozzle fits right up in there? So you want a deep socket, and you want to make sure that it clears. And this is the same socket I put them together. This is a 1 1/16. So that's what I assembled them. But when I assembled them, I was coming in from this side. When you put them in the engine, you're coming in from this side. So you definitely want to make sure you don't bend these. Demonstrate the torque on these. The sign of an amateur mechanic is that everything is on the project is over torqued. So these are torqued to 56 foot-pounds, and that is not a lot of torque when you're using a 1/2-inch drive. For example, let me show you. So I'm just snugging it up right now. It hasn't hit down at the bottom yet. There you go. That's one hand. That's 56 foot-pounds. I'm barely even straining. So again, just wanted to show you what it's like to torque these. Injectors have been rebuilt and installed and torqued to spec. So I'm quickly getting to the point now where I need to put the flywheel and starter on and oil filter housing. I guess I can go ahead and put that on. But it's going to have to come off the engine stand. And I guess I'm going to do that work while it's hanging from the hoist. And in the past, I've had good luck with these engines. That oil pan fits perfectly in a tire. Let's see, that's a 17-inch tire. But if you have a tire, you can just set the tire on the ground, and the oil pan will fit right in the hole of the tire, and then the tire will support the engine, and it keeps anything from being stressed too much. So I'll probably move it onto a tire or something like that. And I just went and picked up this starter. This is AutoZone had one in stock. It's just a basic Duralast starter. This is a starter that I had in a car for a Mercedes 300 SD for years with no issues. So I just went ahead and picked up the same one. And anyway, that's where I'm at, guys. That's how you rebuild and install injectors.